All right. Hello, YouTube land. Brenton Son here again. I talked to a lady. We're going to go by Michelle from New York. I talked to her the other day, and she had several interesting stories. And where we have been doing this story time, I thought I would ask her to come on, and she agreed to do so. I was going to do this the other night, but uploading and rendering took way too long, and she's been kind enough to agree to come on today. So I would like to introduce you to Michelle from New York. Hello, Michelle.
Hello.
All right. And you were very, very funny the other night, too. I don't know if that's the New York kind of accent or what's going on with that, but New Yorkers are funny and they don't even mean to be funny. I was,
That's true.
it is. I don't know. The way you
I
were
don't know.
telling, the way you were telling some of those stories was just so funny, man. It's unbelievable. But you told a lot of stories. And that was one of the fascinating things is that none of the stories were bad. They were all good. And I was thinking about um, how you started off. You were talking about, you waving from upstairs, and then you went into your dad driving down the road, or your uncle, or whoever it was. I don't remember now, but something would pull the wheel. If you could start out with those few stories, and we'll kind of work our way up to the really good ones that I thought were fantastic. Very, very interesting stories. And the doll thing. Oh my goodness, that was just so crazy.
Okay, we'll start with my dad, and he's riding home from my house, and he always tells me that just as he's turning into his road, he's got to hang on tight to the wheel because something is always pulling him into the woods. Wants him to come right off into the woods. So he says, and I know I always got to pull hard the other way. And my father, he's little, but he's strong. And so when he told me that he had to actually use almost all his strength to pull away so he didn't go into the woods, I'm thinking, whatever this thing is, it's got to be powerful. So this one day he leaves, and he calls me as soon as he got home to tell me about it. But he said, just before he got to the corner where it usually pulls him in, his car dies. It just dies. So, and he's a mechanic, so he knows what he's doing when his car breaks down. And there was no reason. He knew that his car was in mechanically good shape.
Right.
Physically, he had a little body cancer and all, but physically, it was in good shape. So he gets out of the car and he goes around, he opens the hood, and my brother and sister in the back seat. And it's like just starting to get dark, and when they're looking out into the woods, it's darker in the woods. And right behind the car where the car died on him is the only light that they have. So while my dad's up looking into the engine thing, my sister and brother are looking out into the woods, and my sister says, look, she says, do you see that over there? And my brother looks, and he says, yeah, what is that? So they're looking, and they unroll the window a little bit, and they get closer as they can, they stick their head out, and now they're hearing this thing, which they said looked like a baby in a pink, with a pink towel over it, and it's calling out to help it. It's saying, help me, help me. And she's saying, like, what is that? And he says, it's talking, it's got to be a baby. And so she says, go get Dad. So he jumps out of the back seat and runs around in the front. And just as he's looking, and when he jumped out, this thing started laughing really, really loud, and it had like an evil laugh to it. And just as my brother's telling my father, and he's pointing in that direction, and he's saying, "Look over there, it's a baby." And that, when he said that, is when the laughing started. So when my dad took like a little step over to look, this thing jumped up and it just started running at him. And my father says, "Get in the car," and he slams the thing down. But before they even made it to the door to get in, it was gone. My sister's sitting in the front seat, and she said she just, when she seen it get up, she just lambasted herself up to the driver's door, and she forgot to shut the window, and she was scared to death. But they all seen it. They all seen it charging at him.
Yeah.
So, and when he got in the car, that was the only time that it didn't pull him going around the corner. And so when he got home, he called me. He told me about it, and I thought, okay, that's pretty interesting.
So yeah, I thought that was really strange that every time he would go around that corner, the wheel would yank like it was something pulling on it, and he knew it, so he prepares himself every time he's going around that corner, and then he happens to break down, and then this baby thing, almost like it's a haunted spot or something with a devil baby or something. That's
it just seemed like it wanted him, and he knew it. He says something evil is in those woods. He says because he says I drive. He says I tried to drive in the center of the road if I can, because I know it's going to pull me, and I'm using all my strength to pull away from it. And he says a couple times it jerked the steering wheel right out of my hand.
wow.
And so he knew something was out there.
Right.
So then so after that, he said he didn't like going the longer way around to avoid that corner, but he said after that, he just went the longer way around.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Why didn't he take another route? But I guess if it's the longer route, you might just drive down the middle of the road and deal with it every once in a while. Man,
yeah, the only time he said he ever had problem was just that one corner. When he was going around that corner, he says, I knew I dread the street because I got to hang on, and something's out there that wants me. So, but he survived to talk about it.
Right.
So,
Can you tell us the story of where I think this was like before you were born or something, when there was these two girls at the store that needed a ride?
Oh yeah, that was my dad when he was a young guy. It was before he ever got married, and he hung around with his best friend Woody, and they had an old, probably 48 Chevy, and because he loved Chevys. And but it was an old car, so I don't know how old the car would have had to been for him to, in it. But I know it was before they got married. And my mother would never let him go by himself with his friend.
Right.
So anyway, they're in the car and they're driving along. They're on their way to California. So I don't know if they actually if this was in California, but it seems like it was like just as they were getting into California. But there was this little gas station. And they stopped there, put a couple bucks in the car. Actually, I think he said he had like $1.10 in gas for gas money. So they put the gas in, and these two girls come walking over, and they seem to appear out of nowhere. And they thought, oh, okay, here's opportunity knocking. Boy, I ain't letting this pass up. So they're deciding on which one who's going to get who. And the girls go into the store, they come out, they got this ice cream, and so of course they had to jump out there and, introduce themselves and everything, and they finally talked the girls into getting into the car, and they were going to drive them home. So, and they're saying, no, it's like right around the corner, we can walk down here, we can walk back, and they're like, well, just let us drive you, and, we'll talk a little bit, and that's it. So they find, okay, so they get in the car, and they're driving around the corner, and it's like 40, 50 feet from where the gas station is, on the same side of the street. So they go around the corner, and the whole street is very narrow, very dark, and the trees are like right up to the road. And it's not paved; it's a dirt road. And so they drive up, and Dad's driving like really slow because he wants to take his time. But the girls start yelling, "Well, stop here! Don't get in front of the house! Don't go in front of the house! The guy's gonna get mad. Just don't go there." He's going, "No, it's okay, it's okay. We want to bring you. Well, I'll walk you right to the door so you're safe." No, you're not taking me to the door. And so the girls start saying, "These guys will kill you. These guys are nothing to mess with." So he checked with his friend to make sure the gun is still in the glove box and all. And it was. So he said, "Okay, then we can go up. Everything's cool." So they get right up from across the street to this house. And so they're kissing on the girls, and the girls are like now pushing away and saying, we gotta go before they come out, we gotta go. And all of a sudden they see these guys come out, and some of them have torches. They're picking up stones, and they start throwing the stones at the car. And
Wow.
so get the gun. The girls jump out, and they're telling their guys, "It's okay, we're okay. Go back in the house, we're okay." And one of the guys went over, yanked the girls out of the way, and they start throwing these are pretty big rocks because they left dents all over the car, which my dad wasn't too happy about. But the girls yelled out to him. They said, "There's no place to turn around if you go straight." And that's all they heard. So they jumped in the car, and he backed up, going like 20 miles an hour backwards till he made it to the street. And they're laughing and they're thinking, wow, these guys are serious. And they got really close to the car. He said at one point to one of the guys that was like right in front, he said, like, if he would have taken another 2 or 3 steps, he could have grabbed him. That's how close they were getting. So they go into the store, and they go back into the little gas station there, and they got a soda pop, and they're just sitting there like, wow, that was really bad. And they're like, his friend is like, "I think we should get out of here. What if they come over here looking for us? Let's get out of here. So he said, okay. So they get in the car, and they start going by, and they try to look down the way where the house was when they passed by. They realize there's no road. All the trees are there's absolutely nowhere where that car would have fit.
Wow.
And they look at each other, and they're like, "You gotta be kidding." And they backed up, and maybe we missed the road. They backed up, and they went again, and they go, "No, it's gone. There's no road." And he says, "There's gotta be road." He says, "Well, no, we looked at all the bumps on the car." He says, "They were throwing rocks. My car's all dented." So they went to the local library to see if, at first they called the police, and the police just laughed and said, "It happened again, go to the library." So they went to the library, and they told the women there about what happened, and asked if there was any other reports. And they showed them a whole book of reports of these same girls going through the same thing, and the same men with little pointed hats coming out. And so they got to write their story in there, and then they went on their way.
That's incredible, man. That when people come out of the house with torches, it's time to go. You know what I mean? I've had dreams like that were very, very scary. When I was a kid, I had a dream, I think 2 different times, with people coming with torches, and of course it was dark and what have you. But yeah, that's a fascinating story that they would have a book at the library with with those stories, and even the police know of it and says, "Oh, it happens again," and they actually even have dents on their car, so they had physical evidence of this actually being true. That's amazing.
Well, the thing was, my dad said that this house was so huge. He said had to be like a 2-story, and there was a lot of, it seemed to be like 7 or 8 windows that he could see. And he's thinking, they must have 15, 20 people living in this house. It was huge. It was almost the size of a barn.
Yeah.
And he said, how could they put a building that big? How could a building that big just disappear? And his friend says, the same way the trees just grew out of nowhere and now there's no road.
But yeah, and the trees being right up next to the road too, that was a little suspect, wasn't it?
Yeah, he said when he went by, he said he could feel his heart giving out. He says, don't tell me that what I saw, I just didn't see. He said, because that's unreal. So they backed up and they did it again. And he said,
if he had went straight, he might not have got out of there.
He was eager, but I think he was more eager to know that he was mentally okay. That's why he called the police.
Yeah.
To see if there was any other reports of this.
Yeah, I mean,
what
are the girls?
The library.
Yeah, where the girls were.
Some little town. I think it was like just as you were getting into California.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting that the girls said, you know, if you go straight, there's nowhere to turn around, so they back out. If they hadn't have backed out, they might not have got out, you know.
That's true.
That's insane. I wonder how many people come up missing in that town.
I don't know. They have to wait till that opens up, and they have to be right ready to get out of there.
Yeah, that's crazy. Now, I guess, what about the story of that doll?
Oh, my baby doll?
Yeah.
I was little. I was probably, I don't think I was in school yet, so I was probably about 3 or 4 years old. And it was Christmas time, and so my parents get me this. They got me and my sister the same doll, and it's an all rubber doll, and there was nothing really fancy about it. I think it had like a little cloth dress on it, and the dresses were even the same color. They were identical dolls, and so one day, and this was down. I thought it was in Florida, but I think now that I was thinking about it, it might have been in Georgia when this happened. But anyway, we lived in this concrete house, and the fireplace. I slept in the room where the fireplace was, and so everybody's going to bed, and I'm in my bed in front of the fireplace, which is up against the wall. My bed is up against the wall, and my sister walks by me, and she's holding her doll, and she smiles, and she walks by, and I just lifted my doll up, and I said, I got one too, and, and that was it, and she walked up, and so then an hour or so later, and I must have fallen asleep, and because when I wake up, I'm looking on the bed for my doll, and I don't see it, but then, so I look on the floor, and there's the doll. I was like, oh, here you are. So I pick the doll up. I put the doll in bed with me, and some of my blanket fell off. So I leaned down to pick my blanket up. When I picked the blanket up, I looked. On the other side of the wall was another doll.
Now, you looked underneath the bed, though, right?
It was on the other side of the wall, but I just picked my doll up, so I looked at the doll, and I saw Linda walk by. She had her doll. So this other doll, I don't know where it came from. Yeah. So I moved to the other side of the bed where I saw the doll, and there was enough space there where I could stick my head down and look and stick my arm in there and grab it. So I did that, and I picked it doll up with 2 fingers. I picked it up by its arm with 2 fingers, and I walked over and I just chucked it into the fireplace, which was still burning. And within seconds, the whole house filled with smoke. And so.
Now, when you told me this before, I think one of the things that made the story interesting too is because you were saying that your sister was liked more than you, and both of you get.
Yeah, it was no doubt about it. Everybody knew she was spoiled.
Yeah, and
she didn't want to do something. She said, "I don't feel good." And my mother would say, "Well, honey, go lay down. Your sister can do it." And then she'd say, "Michelle, come over here and do this. She don't feel good."
Yeah,
So, and it was like this my whole life. It was like I was her maid servant.
so when you woke up and your doll was gone, you pick your doll up, but you know your sister's got her doll already but then when you
Yeah,
see this other
I
doll,
owned the doll.
you said
So,
that
and
doll.
I had my doll in bed with me. So this other third doll, I don't know where it came from. So I picked it up very carefully, and I walked it over to the fireplace, and I just chucked it in. And the whole house filled with smoke. And when it did that, I started crying, screaming, Dad, Dad. And my father comes running out, and he sees the whole room is all full of smoke. And he's going, what happened? What happened? And he's pushing the smoke away from the fireplace so he can see what's in there burning. And I said, I threw a doll in there. He said, why'd you throw your doll in there? He says, I can't afford to get you another doll. I said, no, it's not my doll. I don't know where it is, but it's not mine. And Linda's got her doll. So he said, okay. So he goes and gets a bucket. It was actually like an old milk pail. And he gets a stick and he throws the doll in there. And he runs it outside, and it's smoldering, and he opens the door and a couple windows, and he's getting the smoke out. And and then after he got the house all out of smoke there, he comes over and he's just like, why would you do that? He says, I can't get another doll. Why would you throw your doll? I said, no, look, Dad. And I showed him, here's my doll. He's okay, that was your sister's doll then. He says, now you know that your mother is going to make you give your doll to her. And I said, no, she's got her doll. I saw her. He said, I'm going to go see. So he went out there. He went up to her room, I guess, and he looked, and she had her doll, and he came back down. He says, well, what was that I just took out? I said, I don't know. It's like the devil doll. I don't know where it came from, but I knew there was only two. Me and my sister had one, and there was no more. And all of a sudden, this one here was on the floor by my bed. So he says, well, I'm going to go check. So he walks out there, and there's nothing in the bucket.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, because when you told me that story, you said you looked under the doll and you said, that must be a devil doll because you knew that your sister...
Yeah, that's what I thought when I first seen it. I said, that must be a devil doll. But my father always would tell us, if you disobey your parents, the devil's going to get you. Because that's one thing God will not tolerate is disobedience.
Yeah.
And the devil's going to get you. And he's always telling us how the devil can trick us into doing and seeing things that aren't there and all that's there. So I was brought up on that. So when I seen this strange doll that shouldn't be there, I'm thinking this has to be the devil doll. It's there, but it's not there.
So you just pick it up and toss it in the fire, man. That's
and it burnt because it smoked everything out. It was a rubber doll. It smoked.
Yeah.
It filled up. I mean, within minutes, the whole where I was all black smoke.
So what did he say whenever he went back out to that bucket after he seen both of you really did have your dolls and the doll was gone? What did he say about that? You remember?
Well, that's when he said he was going to go check the bucket. And he went out and he looked. He says, something must have carried it off. He says, it's not in the bucket no more. And so then he goes and gets my brother, and he says, go around there and see if there's any dog footprints or anything like that. And then he went out and they had their flashlights and looking, they didn't see no dog prints that could have came and got it and carried it up. And he don't know how they would have carried it. That thing was on fire. It was hot. It would have never been able to pick it up.
Yeah.
But it's gone.
That's pretty wild story.
Mystery of the devil doll. I don't know what it was then, and I still don't know what it is today. Yeah. I don't know what it was, and I don't know where it went. I have no idea. But that's all I know is I get rid of it.
Yeah, that's crazy. I was trying to look and see what other stories you told me that night. The baby blanket.
The dragon. We were going to talk about the dragon.
Yeah, I know. I was going to save that story for last. That's an incredible story. Now you talked about that there you had that little kid that would that got real scared of you, and there was someone like waving from upstairs in some apartment, and you
Oh
were like,
yeah, I lived in this haunted house in the city in New York, and things were always happening there, and I always kind of like made excuses for the things that would happen, and so um, my one sister came over one day and she says, "Did you know that on the side of your cupboard here you have a little man that's imprinted right into the wood?" And I said, "Get out of here." She goes, "No, look, really." She goes, "It looks like a little elf guy. It's got a little pointed hat." And I went over and I looked at it and I said, "Oh my gosh!" Now every time I pass by here, and it went from the kitchen into the living room. And every time I pass by here, I'm going to run through here because now this thing is going to scare the dickens out of me. So, she was coming over because my mother was out of town, so she was going to stay with us for a couple nights until my mother got back. And so I was going to put her in one room, and my husband wanted to put her in a different room. And so we were in another room discussing it, and then I hear her calling, and I says, "Okay, let's go back out there and we'll talk about it later." So I walked out, and her face was like all puffed out, where her eyes, you couldn't hardly see her eyes. She was just all puffed out. So she says, have you been calling me? And I says, 3 times? And she goes, "Oh, good, it was you." I says, "No." I always hear the same thing, somebody calling me 3 times. And she goes, "Oh, don't tell me that. Even if it's not true, don't tell me that." And then she told me it sounded like it was coming from the bathroom, but it was like right in her ear. But she felt like whatever this was coming from the bathroom, and which was just off from where she was. And so my cousins were staying with us for a while, and they were in the 1 bedroom. And that's why I didn't want to put her in the fire bedroom, because that was more like a closet, and she would have gone through their room to get over there. And so my cousin gets up, and she, what's that? Mary. Frank and Mary were staying with us. Those are my cousins. And so Mary gets up and she sees, what happened to her face. And she's like, "Oh my gosh." She runs back in her room. She just starts, she was a Bible reader. She just stayed in there the whole rest of the day just reading her Bible. And so we went out for a while, and then we were only out for a little while, and we came back, but her face seemed to clear up like right after we left. And then we came back, and so she was afraid to be in any room by herself. So we put the bed, we had a full-size bed. We put it in front of the TV, right up close, so I could turn it off with my toe. So, we let her sleep in the middle because she didn't want to. She was afraid something was going to grab her. So we said, "Okay, you can sleep here." And I had my husband on one side, and she was in the middle. And she was little. She was like 10, 11 years old. And so all night long, we hear tapping at the window, at the living room window where we were. And all night. And it slows down a little bit, and then it gets really, at some point we think that tree is going to break the window. It's hitting so hard. Then it'll slow down a little bit, but it went all night. And she, it's straight out front, and the branches are hitting on the window. It's no big deal. So, okay. So the next day, and it just so happened that my dad I didn't even know he was there, but he was out front, and he had my brother and sister with him. They're like half brother and sister because he was married and they got a divorce, but these kids were always with him. And then I find out that my husband's sister's down there. The two of his sisters are downstairs, and he's telling them stories and things. So when I opened the door, I'm like, wow, everybody's here. Okay. So Adia says, well, I was just going to come up and have coffee. I said, no, we're not having coffee here. And I hated being in the place because it was just so bad. And so I ran, and that's where we went when I went to my in-laws' house. We had coffee. I spilled coffee on my shirt. So I said, let me run up and change my shirt, and then we can go out for coffee somewhere else. So I says to my sister-in-law, I said, Bonnie, come on up with me. I knew my sister wasn't coming up with me. Bonnie, come on up with me. So I hear her say, okay. I hear her walking up the steps right behind me. I go in, I grab a shirt, I put the shirt on, and then I realize it doesn't go with the pants I put on, which really mattered to me back then. And I had boots on. I had to take my boots off to change my pants. So I kind of lean over the bed a little bit, kick my boots off, and while I was leaning on the bed, I could feel two hands on my back, and it just pushed me real hard out of the bed. Bang! And I'm like, Bonnie, stop it! I just stopped goofing off. So I get up, and I kind of turn around. She's not there. And so I go back into my little closet room and grab some pants and put my pants on, put my boots on. And while I'm in there changing my clothes, I hear her running around the table. And it's like she's walking, and you hear the creak, 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 creak. And then she's running. And I'm like, I didn't know she had that much energy. And I just laughed about it. So I come out, and I'm going down, and I looked around, and I'm like, all right, Bonnie, I'm done. I'm going back down. So I head down the stairs, and there's Bonnie sitting at the bottom of the stairs. And I said, Bonnie, didn't you even come up with me? She said, no, I told you no. And I said, listen, when I said come up with me, I heard you, or something, follow me up the stairs. I said, and when I was up there, something pushed me on the bed. I said, so even if it wasn't you, tell me it was you. She goes, it wasn't me. And they all said, no, she hasn't even moved. I'm like, oh, okay. So then they went, my two sister-in-laws went one way. They went home to their house. And so I was going to go with my father. His truck, for some reason, was parked across the street. So he tells my little sister, who was probably 6 or 7, take her hand and walk across the street, get in the truck. So she grabs her hand, we start walking across, and she turns around. Dad said something. And so she turned around to see what he's talking about, and she must have looked up in my window. But I didn't see nothing. I didn't turn around. So she pulls her hand away from me, and she goes and grabs onto his leg, and she says, she's evil. She's the devil. I don't want to touch her. I don't want to talk to her. I'm like, what is going on? What are you doing? What's the matter? And she is now hiding behind my father, and she will not let me get near her. She just screams. So we get in the truck, and we went and had coffee at some restaurant. And years later, like I'm like 64 now, and this was like maybe 10 years ago. I finally talked to her, and she told me that when she turned around to see what Dad was talking about, she happened to look up in my kitchen window, and I was waving goodbye to her from the kitchen window, going from one window to the other. She said I waved real quick, and then I just appeared in the other kitchen window, waving goodbye to her. Wow. And I don't know. It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
Wow. So that she just freaked out and thought Well, I guess if you was waving from one window and then appear in the other window, she probably thinks, well, this might not even be her. If it's some appearing person. Yeah,
I know,
that's a
but
pretty
she
crazy
said it
story.
looked like me. I had real long hair, and I moved my hair. But my sister, the one that was stayed with me that night, she had the same experience. I would never stay alone in the house. And I
Um,
used to go downstairs to my neighbors as soon as my husband left for work. But then I got in a fight with them over the laundry. And so then I would have my husband drop me off at my in-laws, and then he would pick me up on his way home. But, so this one day I'm there, and it was like nighttime, and it was in like the dead of winter. And we're sitting there playing cards, and there's a knock on the door. And so I go over, I answer the door, and my sister's standing there with the downstairs neighbor, my downstairs neighbor, who I'm not even talking to. And he says, "How did you get here so quick?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, she was outside, and she kept telling you to unlock the bottom door, and you kept waving her up to come up, and you went from one window to the other window, and you kept like motioning for her, come on up, come on up." But she was making the gesture that I had to unlock the door. And she knocked on my door, and I saw you. He says, "I saw you go from one window to the other, and you keep motioning for us to come up." And so the only thing I knew that maybe you and Chuck had a fight, and that maybe he was over there, and I was going to drop her off over here to you, to him, because I knew you were home. And I says, "No." I says, "That's why I'm never home when he's not there, because things like this happen all the time."
So you were glad to move away from there, right?
Oh yeah, I was there. They said I was the only one that's been. I was there for a year and a half, and they said I've been the longest one to ever stay there.
Wow. So I guess that a lot of people had moved out pretty quick because of that, huh?
Well, my friends and stuff would say, "Oh, we went by your house the other day. You must change your kitchen curtains every day." I said, "No, I don't actually. I may change them twice a year." And they said, "Every time we go by your house, one day you had purple curtains up, and like 15 minutes later you had yellow curtains." And we're always making a joke about it, like that must be how you spend your day, is changing your kitchen curtains.
Wow.
I'm like, "No, I don't at all."
That is crazy.
Yeah, that's what I do, is stay home and change my kitchen curtains. But I used to go by there to see if I would experience the same thing with whoever was living there, to see if their curtains seemed to change. And they did. I went by like 3 times, maybe a week or 2 apart from each other. And every time I went, they were different. And the last time I went, everybody was outside. It was in the summer. And I asked the lady how long she'd been there. And she said it was just a couple months. And I said, "Did you ever have anything freaky happen?" And she says, "No, I'm not even into that." She says, I wasn't into it either. It just happened. And she says, "Oh, you must be into like witchcraft and stuff." I says, "No, actually I'm not." I says, "But I was just wondering if you had any strange occurrences." And she says, "No." And like 2 or 3 days after that, we drive down again, and the house was burnt down.
Wow. Huh. Wow.
But this thing, and this was downstairs, didn't have a problem at all. But this thing, these spirits, were in the air. So they are. It says in the Bible, they are the prince of the air, the evil spirits are the prince of the air. And these things were there. I guess that's where they claimed their space. And somebody built a house over them and trapped them in. And I imagine, I don't know if they ever rebuilt or whatever, but if they do, I imagine that they're going to have the same problem because they're going to just enclose the same space again.
Yeah, there was something odd about the upstairs apartment if it wasn't going on anywhere else, and everybody that moved in, and you get drive by later and the curtains changed.
Like right across the street, the house that was there years ago when my parents were, well, my grandmother lived not too far from there, and she knew the woman that lived there, and the woman was having an affair on her husband, and the husband came home and caught her lover there and chopped both of their heads off.
In that apartment?
In the apartment right across the street from there.
Oh, okay.
And then right around the corner from there was, Danielle, come and get this dog. And then right around the corner, there was a old lady living there. She must have been 80 years old. And we lived just up the street. And this was like years later. We lived right on the back side of that. And my mother used to take her down food and gifts for Christmas and stuff. And so she had all these mediums and spiritualists and stuff that used to come over. And her house was like so haunted. So haunted. I went there once, and my mother wanted me to bring her down these Christmas presents she got her. And I stood next to the door, and I couldn't. I'm like, and she's like, "Oh, come on in, and we'll have tea." And Mickey's here, and the Indians won't leave Donald alone. And she's just going on. I'm thinking, "Oh, this lady's crazy." Then doors started shutting, and windows started opening and closing, and doors are slamming. And I'm like, "No, really, I just wanted to drop these things off and wish you a Merry Christmas." And I got to get back home right now. Right now. She's like, "Oh, okay." So I left.
Yeah.
So that was just, that was in a little area, but I don't know if these evil spirits or whatever can all join together, or if they're all their own little entities causing chaos in the world.
Well, I think they all serve one master. Jesus said that Satan's kingdom is not divided. All right, I would like for you to now tell us about the dragon thing. That was the one story that you had commented about, and it was so fascinating to me. And then when I heard you tell the story, oh my goodness, that's just insane. Kind of take us through that story and give us every detail you can think of, and then also about when you ask your sister about it later, way down the later in life, if you would.
Okay. So anyway, my mother has this rule that if she catches you yawning, you go to bed. You must be tired. So I seen my sister, the spoiled one. I seen her yawning, and I didn't make her go upstairs, but I tried to hide my yawn, but she caught me, and she sent me upstairs. So my sister Ruth says, "Well, you can't send her up there by herself. It's not right." So I'll go up with her. So she comes up with me, and there's two beds. There's one bed that's against the wall. It's not against the wall, but it's up near the wall on the other side of the room. My bed, which is a twin bed, is right next to the door because the only light we had was the hall light. So she gets this, the old Sears catalog. I'm sure everybody's familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
And she had cut out of cardboard these paper dolls, and we were finding clothes, and she was cutting them out and gluing them together so that they would fit these dolls she made. And so she's telling me, go ahead and look through the book and see if you see anything, anything you like, and we'll, try to fit it to the doll. So, okay. So I'm sitting there just thumbing through the thing, and, oh, that's pretty. We're talking, and it's, everything's okay. And then all of a sudden, I asked her about something, and she don't answer me. So I look up, and I see her just staring over my shoulder. And I'm like, Ruth, don't do that. What are you doing? Don't do that. You're scaring me. And it looked like she had seen a ghost. And her mouth was just dropped open, and she was just froze, holding her scissors in her hand, and she was just looked like frozen. So I turned around to look to see what she's seeing, and I see this huge red dragon, and it's standing behind the other bed, between the window and the bed, and it is huge. The head on it was the size of one of them very large tires, and it had these little horns, and you would think that, you know, if there was horns, they'd be massive or something, but they weren't. They were just little horns and the teeth was there was so many, and they were like very sharp, and it was drooling on the bed, and the tail came around the bed to the other side of the bed. It came from behind the bed where the dragon was, and the tail was almost touching the other leg on the floor. It was just massive. And the head had to turn, and it was just inches away from the ceiling. But it couldn't possibly have lifted its head right up, or it would have went right through the ceiling. It was huge, and it was all red, and it had like these black lines through it, like shadow lines.
Mm-hmm.
And the eyes were really small, but it seemed like they just pierced straight through you. And when I seen this thing, at first I just looked at the whole size of it, and then I just opened my mouth and I just screamed. It was like, I didn't even know I could scream that loud, but I did. And when I first screamed, it scared me in the scream. It was just like one long, steady scream, and with that, I hear people racing up the stairs. And then I hear my dad, and as soon as he put his foot in front of the door, and I turned away just as he was getting closer to the door, and the thing had disappeared. So I looked back, and it was gone. And he came in, and he snatched up my sister and took her, brought her back downstairs. And now I'm so scared. I'm still sitting on this bed. I'm thinking this thing now knows I'm alone. It's going to come and get me. And so I just close my eyes, and I'm just praying in my head, God, protect me. Put your precious blood over me. Don't let this thing come back and get me. And so I'm just sitting there praying in my head. And then my brother comes back up and gets me and brings me back down. So we never talked about it. Nobody ever mentioned it. After we got back downstairs, my father got a couple flashlights. They went upstairs, and we told them what we saw. We both saw the same thing. And they looked through the flashlight. They looked out the window. They looked under the bed. They looked in the closet. Everything. They didn't see nothing. And but after that day, we never talked about it. It was just something that there was no need to talk about it. It was just craziness. And so years later, like this was maybe 5-10 years ago, and this happened back when I was like 7. So now I'm 64. So like 5 years ago, I go down to where they live and my 2 sisters, and I visit this sister who is living in another state. And I said to her, do you remember when we were cutting out dolls from the Sears catalog? And she goes, oh yeah. She goes, wasn't that scary? What a hoot. That's all. And then she said, well, you want coffee? And that was it. That's all she would say. She didn't want to even talk about it.
No, when you told me that before, you said, oh, the red dragon. Wasn't that a hoot or something like that?
Yeah. She mentioned the red dragon. She goes, oh, the red dragon. Yeah, wasn't that a hoot? That's all she would say. I said, but wait a minute. Can we discuss this for a minute? I said, so it really did happen. She goes, okay. She goes, Do you want sugar with your coffee? She wouldn't talk about it. That's it. That was the end of the conversation with her.
Wow, that's
But
amazing. You know, you commented on the video where me and my sister had where that red devil thing came out of the wall and grabbed me, and my sister walked in on it. And then I had said in that story that we never talked about it until I was 32 years old, and it happened when I was 5. And then I
yeah,
said, "Do you remember when we?" And she said, "Oh, like it was yesterday." Her and I discussed it. So when you told me that your sister said, "Oh, the red dragon wasn't that crazy, or wasn't that a hoot?" and then want some coffee?
yeah,
That's
that was
incredible.
the end of that.
Yeah,
I'm like, wait a minute, can we talk about this? And she says, there's nothing to discuss. She says, you know, it happened. We think it happened. I said, well, wait a minute. I said, didn't Dad come up and grab you and leave me there? And she says, look, do you want to have your coffee inside or outside?
yeah,
She wouldn't talk about it.
yeah. So when you looked over there and you saw this, was a dragon like a typical dinosaur looking type thing with 4 feet on the
It
ground?
looked almost like a dinosaur that had like a round mouth on it. And everything was like rounded. It didn't have the spikes on the back and it was like, you know, Dino on the Flintstones. It
Yeah.
looked almost like that, but it wasn't purple and it didn't have those big spots. But it was just red and had these little horns and they went down and they kind of curled up.
I mean that's incredible. And then you said it had like a lot of teeth.
It had a lot of sharp teeth.
Now
And it
when
was almost like it was smiling, you know? It was just, it
yeah.
was so fierce looking.
Now when you described the color of it, it made me think about my encounter where the thing was red, and then I was trying to describe in the video of where it seemed like light emanated from within it, because the only thing I can just say, if you wanted to see kind of what it looked like, is put your hand on a flashlight at night in the dark and it makes your hand glow red. And then
Right.
around the cuticles, it makes the cuticles look black and the creases in your finger look black. So when you were saying it was red with these black lines in it, it almost sounds kind of like the lines must have been wrinkles or creases in it, or the scales, or something like that. Did it emanate like seem almost have a glow to it, or it was just red?
No, not at all. The picture that was there with the fingers, and as soon as I seen the color on that, it just brought the picture of that dragon right in my head, because it was the same thing. It was the same. It was almost like it was outlined in black, and then like black shadows and stuff through it, and
Yeah.
it was just enormous.
Yeah. I know that there's a story that of someone who that I listened to the story. I don't know the person, but he had a near death experience. He accidentally, they were playing around on a Marine barracks, and they put a rope around his neck, and he actually ended up hanging himself on accident, and he came out of his body, and he ended up going to the other dimension. He was in this outer darkness, but this devil thing ended up grabbing him. And he said when he looked at the thing, he said it was like he could see like black, kind of like shadow, something or another, like going underneath the skin. So when you're describing that, it's kind of what I picture. But you pretty much are saying it looked like that picture that I drew in that video.
Yeah. But you know what? Can I tell you one more story?
Yeah, certainly.
And do we have time?
Yeah.
Okay. Back when I was like 15, one of the times when my mother threw me out of the house, I went to live with my aunt. And I was like her slave, you know. It was like, okay, and anytime she had like 11 kids. So, and if anybody came over, the first thing she did was put something on to eat, you know. So I was like constantly doing dishes. And so this one day, I'm sleeping. It was probably 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. And she comes in and wakes me up and says, somebody's here to see you. I'm thinking it's got to be somebody from my family. Who else would care, you know? So I go out and she tells me, sit down at the table. This lady's coming in. She wants to talk to you. I'm like, okay, maybe it's somebody from the school because I'm going to have to start school there. So I'm sitting there, and here comes this little old lady who's probably in her 80s and probably 90s. She was really old. She walked very slow, and she introduced herself as Mrs. Green. And she sat down, and she had this colander with green beans, string beans in it. And she asked me to help snip her beans. And I'm like, sure, okay. So I washed my hands, and I went over and started snipping beans with her. And she says, listen, she says, I got to tell you something. She says, last night, she says, God told me today I had to come and talk to you. She says, now when I was a young girl, I had gotten married. We've been married about a year. And I was in a bad car accident. And they brought me into the hospital, and they pronounced me dead. And I was up above my body, watching this whole thing as they pronounced me dead. They put the sheet over me, and as soon as the floor of the thing, and then they brought me down to the morgue, and my body kind of shot right back down to the morgue. I did not want to leave. And she says, and so then my body just eased up, and there was a shelf in the morgue, and on top of the shelf is this red mitten. And under the bed, I could see right through the bed, under the bed, there was a gold pen. And I thought, that was really strange, that I could see through the bed. And then with that, she was gone. Her body just shot up out of the air. And she said when she got to where she was going, and she went through the whole tunnel thing, and when she came out, she saw grass, and she saw people, but they were standing off in a distance, and they were just waving to her. And so she started walking towards them. But then she says this man approached her. He says, and I knew immediately that this was Jesus. And he said to me, you can't stay. You can't stay. You got to go back. And I'm telling you, oh, no, I don't want to. And he says, no, listen, you got to go back. You're going to have a baby girl. And then a couple years after that, you're going to have a boy. And you got to be there for your children. You got to go back. But I wanted to tell you something. And she says, listen, no matter what you tell me, I'm not going nowhere. He says, no. He says, I'm giving you a job. He says, there's certain people on earth that you have to talk to. And when that tour is done, I'm bringing you back home. So, and she's begging him that she don't want to leave. And he's saying, it's going to be okay. He says, just talk to them. And she's saying, who are they? Well, give me names. How many are there? And he says, just do as I ask you to do. He says, and I'll bring you right back as soon as you're done. And in just the twinkling of an eye, she was back in her body. And it was like she didn't go through no tunnel, no nothing. And it just clicked and she's back. And when she opened her eyes, they still have the sheet over her, and there's a guy standing there. And, there's two guys. There's one on either side of her. and they are writing on this piece of paper on a clipboard. And the guy says, I lost my pen. I don't know where my pen is. He says, it's a gold pen. He says, my father gave it to me when I graduated medical school. He said, I lost the pen. I don't know where it is. And she said, it's under the bed. And when she said that, they both almost had a heart attack. They looked at each other to see if each other had said it. And they pulled the blanket, the sheet out, and she's got her eyes open, and she's saying, it's under the bed. He says, look under the bed. And he bends over and he sees the pen. And so he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. He says, oh my God, she's okay. So they take her out of there, and they put her back up into a room, and the husband and everybody is still there. And they tell him, look, we don't know what happened. She just started talking, and she's back. And she had a collapsed lung, and she had just broken like a toe or something. So they were able to fix those problems, and so the nurse and it must have been wintertime, because this nurse is saying that one of these days I got to go buy me some more mittens. She said, it's winter out now. I lost my other mitten last winter, and I have no idea where it is. And she happened to be in the room right across from the hall, and she heard this. And she says, ma'am, come here. She called her in. She said, listen. She says, you got a red mitten missing? She says, yeah. She says, it's up on the top shelf down in the morgue. And she goes, what? She goes, I'm telling you that I saw a red mitten up there. And so she sends one of the guys to go down and look for this red mitten. And sure enough, he brings it down and gives it to her. So it was she was only there for like 2 or 3 days, and she went home, and she lived her life. And every time she'd meet somebody, she would tell them about her experience. She says, and Jesus told me I have to talk to people, but I don't know who they are, and I don't know how many there are. So every time I have the chance to talk to somebody, I got to take the chance that maybe their name is on that list that Jesus gave, has for me. So, and she's telling me this story. She says, I don't know how much longer the Lord's going to make me go on with this. I'm an old woman. I've raised my kids. He told me I had to be here to raise my kids. Well, I raised my kids. I've seen all my grandchildren grow up and go off and have their life. And I'm still waiting for them to call me home. And so she says, and when I found out that you were here, the Lord woke me up this morning, told me I had to be here to talk to you. So that's why I'm here. And I got to tell you that you must be on the list, because he woke me up and told me, get up and get dressed and go over there. And so now I'm telling you, this is the story. There's life after death. That there's definitely a heaven, and we're all going home. If you're good and you obey his laws, you're all going home someday. And I was so moved by it. I was like in tears by the time she got done. And so she picked up her beans and she walked out the door, and that was it. And my Aunt Millie, she said, now, why wouldn't she come over? She said she didn't even tell me the story. I knew nothing about it. Why wouldn't she come over and talk to me? I said, I don't know. I said, but it's nice to know that I have a place to go, that somebody actually wants me.
Well, that's a good story there for sure. That's amazing.
And my uncle built most of the homes in the area where they live. And so he says, my aunt tells him, go over and ask her to come over for coffee. She was really bothered that she didn't come over to tell her the story. So she says, go over and invite her over for some coffee this morning. So my uncle goes over there and he's knocking on the door, no answer. So he goes into her back door, which she knew she always left open, and he finds her sitting at the table with the string beans still at the table. She died. She must have just got home and put the beans on the thing, and she died right there. So I was the last person.
Wow.
I
That's
was
incredible.
the last person out of the list.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Michelle, I really thank you for sharing that. That's an awesome way to end this episode of Mysteries to Search. The Lord works in mysterious ways.
He sure does.
Yeah. So if you're on the list, that's good news. You know?
I'm on his list.
That's right. It's good to be on Jesus' list. That's for sure. So I think that that's a good place to end this, Michelle. You hang on the line there, and I'm going to go ahead and end the show.
Okay.
You all, everybody out there in YouTube land, that's a series of very progressive stories, and ending with a very awesome story. The mystery of salvation. That's a mystery for sure. But it's a mystery that we can all know if you put your trust in Jesus, and if you believe that that Jesus is Son of God, you confess with your mouth that He is the Lord, and you believe that He was raised from the dead. The Bible says that you shall be saved. That's a mystery that we can certainly know the answers to, and you can spend your life searching that mystery out. And it sounds like the woman that she met there certainly had a good calling on her life, and she was wondering what this list was all about, and the only one that got to know about that list for sure was that there was one person that was the last one on that list, and that happens to be our guest here tonight. That's a pretty cool story. So I ask that you all share these videos, subscribe, like the videos, and comment, and I will see you on the next video. God bless. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.